This is the song about the Julia Belle Swain.
Hello, I'm Keith Dudding, host of Down Yonder on the rootsfm.org, a bluegrass program that I hope folks will listen to. We're here with Katie Harford Hogue and Megan Lynch Chowning and Sharon Gilchrist to talk about Julia Belle, the second installment of the John Hartford Fills Tunes project. I've got volume 1 right here, and of course this came out in 2020, just in time for COVID. So great. How did that release go?
It's a terrible marketing plan. Don't ever do it that way.
Well, that certainly inhibited your ability to get the music played out. But in terms of the quality of the product, it was a fine recording. How long after you put the wraps on the first one did you say, we've got to do that again?
I think it was, when COVID hit, I had literally that Friday before had just started handing CDs out to the people who had worked on the project and was about to start mailing them. That weekend, a tornado hit East Nashville and different parts of Tennessee and devastated communities, including our artistic community there. And then a couple days later, COVID hit, the whole country shuts down. It was a bit like launching a bird into a jet engine. There's just feathers and silence everywhere. And we all literally just sat down and like, what do we do? Because, artists are online trying to continue. I mean, that getting out and playing is their lifeblood. And this is happening in March and it just cuts out the touring season and it hurts them so much. So artists are online playing music, for Venmo, tip jar, digital tip jar types of things just to keep going. And it felt strange to be promoting an album in the middle of all that. So we
Yeah.
kind of just bits and pieces here and there, but we just really didn't do a whole lot because we wanted to make sure the artist community got what they needed first. After that, things loosening a little bit, we did hire a PR firm to help us kind of get the word out a little later. We had not released digitally yet. And it got traction, and we ended up with a Grammy nomination. It might be because I don't know if a lot of people were submitting at that point. But I think it was a worthwhile effort and it was very helpful. COVID just was a very strange time and it took a few years to kind of work through that. But Megan and I stayed in touch and we got to talking and said, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I think, and this is Megan talking, by the way, for the audio version of this. I think that one thing that people need to know about Katie is that Katie, is John Hartford's daughter, and there are definitely some genetics at play in that. As prolific a writer and creator as John Hartford was, Katie is also prolific with her ideas and her ability, her visions about things to create and put out into the world. So, and I've said this, in interviews and just to friends, once you get into the Katie circle of things, you're going to just be making stuff. You're just going to be making stuff. That's just how it works. And I'm sorry if that's not what you want for your life, but that's how it's going to be. And I love that because the energy is, and she'll tell you as quickly as anybody, and I'm not telling tales out of school because she's sitting right here. So, but she'll tell you, of course, she gets exhausted with all the different things that are going on, but that's just the creative mind. It's just how it works. And so it really wasn't, I played on volume 1, but I wasn't involved in the making of it. But it was not long after, I think that album wrapped really that she started coming to me and saying, you and I are kind of in touch about these things. She'd bounced a few things off of me and we had a good working relationship already, just becoming friends and getting to know one another. And she was already talking about volume 2 pretty early on, and I think probably earlier than many people talking about it, but
I had all this time on my hands sitting.
I mean, why not? And it was really, I think, kind of came in conjunction with after lockdown started to lift and people started, really playing shows out, she immediately came to me and Tristan Scroggins. We have 3 tracks on volume 1 together, and said, okay, because of everything that shut everything down, and not being able to get these tunes out, would you guys go play tunes from volume 1 out in the world? Just book shows wherever you feel like it, whatever, house concerts, whatever you want to do. Will you just go play the tunes, and will you teach them to some people, so that, because all she's ever wanted is to get these tunes out into the world so that musicians and audiences can hear them. Otherwise, they would just, it's, Schrodinger's fiddle tune, right? Like, if it just exists in the spiral bound notebook, does it really exist, And so that, I think, it's almost, the answer to your, I think, is like almost immediately. That's what I think, because that's just how I've seen Katie work in my experience, and that's great. It's, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here with you now.
Now, Megan, you played on the first one, but Sharon, you did not. How did you join this merry band?
You're going to have to ask Megan and Katie that question. It was their idea.
Okay.
We dragged her into the Katie Creative Circle. That's what happened.
I went to Megan.
Sharon
and
and I
Megan
had worked
Sharon.
together. Yeah, I did. I really. Sharon and I had worked together coaching a bluegrass band of young people out on the West Coast. Both she and I had been private teachers to members of this band, and their families hired us to come and sort of do a weekend coaching session with them and just kind of mentor them a little bit. And we knew each other, certainly we were friends and all of that, but this was the first time we had really worked together in a really hardcore, day by day environment. And I was so blown away by her attention to detail and her ear for sounds and ideas, and her creative vision from a sonic perspective. And Katie was kind of bugging me, like, I want you to help me work on it. And I was like, that's not really my strong suit necessarily. I mean, I'm a musician and I certainly have an ear for things, but I just immediately, my first thought was to Sharon. And so I talked to Katie about that. And I said, I think if we do it this way, then all 3 of us will bring something, to the table. And we had a meeting, we got along, and it was, it was on from there,
Well, good news, Sharon. You're going to be making stuff now because you're in Katie's circle. When you were invited, any
Katie's making dinner next.
Did you have any reservations or concerns about what you were getting yourself into, or did you just get it and say, I can do that?
I don't think I had any reservations. I had so enjoyed working with Megan, and really respect her on so many levels that I figured if she was suggesting me for this, it would probably, hopefully, go well. I really do enjoy producing. I feel fairly in my element doing that. So I was hoping I could do the project justice. It's a huge project, honoring somebody that I am, so admiring of. So definitely was, like something that was like, oh, I hope I don't mess it up. And so
you didn't.
No reservations, but it was definitely like a step up production wise for me. This is an 18-track compilation record. I really didn't understand what that meant until about 10 tracks in, which is about the time you do one record, right? But then realizing, wow, okay, this is really a different set of people on each track. There's definitely repeat players, but there's not one repeating configuration except for Uncle Earl. So when that comes into mixing and overdubs, it's definitely a different beast than just a regular one band album. So there's a learning curve for me in that. But I just so enjoyed it and loved doing all of that.
Good for you. Let me ask about a couple choices that I take it, made as a team. First of all, this volume 2 is all female musicians, unless I missed something in the liner notes, but it's like all women. Let's do it this way. came to you? Whose idea was that? Whose brilliant idea was that?
That's Katie. That was Katie's vision. I think
She's shrugging her shoulder and not taking credit for it. Katie,
yeah,
Megan,
well,
Sharon?
let me give her credit for it. That was Katie. Yeah. So Katie, what was your thought process there? Because
Thank you. There's a better question.
I'll blame it on you, but now you have to back it up.
My thought process was, why the heck not?
Yeah.
I just wanted to. I
Yeah.
mean, flat out just wanted to.
Mhm.
And I don't know that it was an issue of timeliness or whatever, but dang it, there are some extremely talented women players. I mean, my goodness. And why not? Let's do it. And honestly, I had the ability to make it happen. I got to make the decision.
Good for
And
you.
so that's what we did.
I'll add to the mix of that. Historically speaking, from my understanding, Hartford is one of the first people who would hire women to be in his band. He really did make an effort to, I don't know if he made an effort, but he was very inclusive of having women be part of his deal. And so I think that it's really cool to, I mean, that was a step in our music history for that to become more prominent. So maybe it's fitting in that on that level.
Maybe so. And I don't even know that I was thinking about that. I mean, I knew that in that one iteration of the Steamboat Band, he had Holly and Ruth and he tons of friends, and especially at that last point, when he was towards the end, so many people around the house that had come back and were playing and for him and sitting with him. So many people, and I mean, it wasn't like all guys or all women. It was just a big mix of people. He just connected with people from everywhere, and they were friends. And
I also think too that and we're so proud to have Holly Odell on the record with the track that she sang and played on. For me, and this is something that, I think Sharon has talked about being a big part of the thought process for her. But, these tunes and the many spiral bound notebooks full of original tunes that we're drawing all this material from, part of this was just, an outlet for John's overwhelming, creativity that we see in all aspects of everything that he did. But there was also a specific thing going on in which the last, 20 or so years of his life, he really focused on the fiddle and learning to read and write standard notation. And writing a lot of these tunes, part of that was as part of the learning process of doing that. And Holly Odell, a member of his band, an incredible musician, was part of teaching him some of the basics of reading and writing standard notation. So you kind of put all that together, and then we have her on the album, and you have her as an impetus for writing these thousands of tunes that we're drawing from for the album. It just seemed like such a good fit in so many ways. And something that I've been saying too, that I realized, and we talked about this in one of our meetings, the three of us were making lists. This was early on, making lists of all the different women that we wanted to, have involved. And it just got to the point where it was like, oh, there's too many to choose from, and we're just going to have to work on logistics. And all of us sort of stopped and had this collective realization that we are existing in a time where we have too many incredible women to choose from. And, no time like the present to put out an album that has 48 different artists on it.
48.
And we could have had another 48 easily and had it at the same caliber without even blinking. And and being able to sort of put that, mark in and sort of make this album at this time with these women and have this embarrassment of riches to just say, hey, look around, they're everywhere and they're phenomenal. And I think that was a big thing for us too. Once we kind of made, once Katie came to us and said, this is what we want to do, Sharon and I were like, look at the dozens of people we could have.
It's a good problem, is having an abundance
That's
of
it.
talent to select from. To follow up on that, go ahead, please
Can
jump
I
in.
just say one thing there? I think something for me and a lot of women feel this way too. Like sometimes being part of an all-female thing, it can be like, oh, by doing that, am I keeping women seen as a minority, or like we need to be bolstered?
Right.
So there's a little bit of a question mark there for me, and like, but I want to do this music and it's going to be great. And I know we're going to have great musicians, so I'm in. And then in the process of it, I will say, I mean, part of Katie's vision was this is female from beginning to end. The engineer, the mix engineer, the
Mastering.
artwork, mastering. And for the most part, that is what we stuck to. There were some logistics that actually required, one person really needed to record with their engineer who was a man, and that kind of became a
We had
little.
a couple of token dudes,
Yeah, we needed a couple of token dudes.
I
Yeah.
feel honored just to be here, so thank you for letting me in the club.
But in the process of that, that's when I realized, like, I personally couldn't, when we sat down to pick our engineers, I couldn't
Yeah.
a whole heck of a lot of female engineers,
Yeah.
especially in this genre of music.
Yeah.
And then I went and talked to some folks and found out there are tons of them. And I was like, okay, maybe there's still some validity in, I mean, for me, like maybe now I'm going to choose one of those engineers when I go record something instead of just going with the same guy I've always wanted to work with.
Mhm.
So still bringing people to light, especially in this in I feel like acoustic music or fiddle tune world, it's I think it's still nice to bring that voice to women and bolster some women in that way.
Absolutely. Once you decided, who your people are going to invite, what was the process of matching them up with material? Did you just say, here's the Mammoth Book of Fiddle Tunes, go crazy? Or how did you recommend tunes to them? What was the selection process like?
I mean, basically, we handed in the book or a list of tunes and said,
Mhm.
you pick what speaks to you. Because part of this process, and was also the same on volume 1, the point of doing this is I think it's creatively stifling to assign tunes to people and to say, okay, you do this and do it this way. I don't want that. I don't think any of us wants that. We want to hear what someone else has to bring. We want to discover. We want to hear something new, something fresh. And so we are the main criteria is it needs to come out of this book. Past that, and we've chosen you because we know we've seen a lot of your creative output and we know that you're a fit. So here's the book. You pick what speaks to you. You come into the studio and you play it through your filter, and let's record that and see what comes of it. And we would get into the studio and you guys tell me, because Sharon, you were definitely y'all were more on the music end of it, but I don't think we necessarily knew what was coming into the studio that day. I had an idea, but it wasn't completely set out. I don't know.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And in terms of choosing the material, that was its own creative process too. It seemed like each artist kind of had a different approach in choosing their
Yeah.
track. Some people knew what they like. I wanted Deanie Richardson said, I love D tunes, and I asked each artist, I was like, okay, there's 176 of these tunes to listen through. Matt Combs, the producer of the first album, Volume 1,
Yeah.
made these beautiful MP3s. They sound so great, of just the melody. for
Yeah.
each 100.
Yeah, those are incredibly helpful. Oh,
They're,
man,
they're
it's so
up on
great to
the
have those.
website too. Sorry, Megan. They're up on the website, the John Hartford Mammoth Fiddle Tune Collection website. They're all there, and anybody can go and listen to them. So if somebody's reading the book and they are wondering if they're getting it right, they can check in there. So we would send people there, and I was like, I know these people are busy. If they want help with the 176 going through and selecting them, I offered that help. I could whittle it down if they gave me some guiding points, and maybe half of the people did that, and the other half really went through and listened to as many as they could and found something that spoke to them. But so that was an interesting thing. And then in terms of going into the studio, I would simply ask people to send me a little demo, like at least the night before we go in, so that I've heard the arrangement. I can check the chord changes. That's one aspect of this, is that the tune writing doesn't include any chord changes.
I
So
was going to ask, as a rhythm guitar player, I know that the melodies in the book are just a sketch. Here's the melody, but how you accompany that and where the chord changes go, I was dying to find out who was the authority, or was that something that each unit sort of like arrived at their own arrangement? How did you do that? Because it's amazing.
each unit arrived at their own arrangement, and I
Wow.
asked for the opportunity to listen to that before we went in, just so that we didn't end up with like 10 tunes in the key of A that all go to the 6 minor. So we've got enough variety, and the chord changes are being approached with variety as well. And just in case I had an idea that I wanted to throw out there, which happened a few times, and people were super receptive to that. And it was just such a collaborative thing in that way. And really, I loved, for me, this was such an opportunity to work with a lot of different people that I had not worked with. And then seeing them in a creative moment and kind of seeing how their brain works, or what their preferences are, or just how they approach something.
I loved all those different systems. Everybody, some people have a system and they have a way that they like to do this kind of thing because maybe they've done a lot of solo fiddle tune records or whatever. So this is a process that's very familiar to them. Some of them are more fiddle players like in a band setting. And so their system was a little more just sort of catch as catch can, and they were a little more chaotic about it. And just watching everybody's different process was one of my favorite parts about this, because first of all, it helped inform my own processes going forward. I grabbed some things from watching all these different artists and how they went about it for my own, for my own life. And I think the other thing too, going back to the tunes themselves, is that, and Sharon was talking about, and I was glad you brought up the thing about having people send in the recordings, because I think that was a part of it that that didn't even occur to me. And then I realized you were doing that, because as the sort of, in charge of the audio part of this, you needed it. You got 48 separate players on this album, and you need to have some cohesion and yet some semblance of individuality and creativity. Like, how do you strike that balance? And the work that you put in on that part of it and just listening ahead of time was so inspiring to me, in the organizational audio sense of it, because there are a lot of trends that happen in choosing chord progressions, like for old time tunes. This is a very niche discussion here, but those things kind of go into, trends and things that are popular, and putting the 6 minor at the beginning of this or that, whatever. And so you can't throw the same tricks out over and over, in every tune, right? So Sharon, your ability to kind of manage all of that and just kind of keep that from getting too out of hand was so impressive. But I think this shows you what John Hartford was up to over the course of the 20 years that he wrote all of these tunes, which was a deep exploration of so many different genres of fiddle music. Because it's actually, and part of this is Matt Combs's choosing of the 176 tunes that went into the book put us in a really good place, so that there are rags, two steps, polkas, waltzes, schottisches, marches, breakdowns. I mean, there's such a wide variety of stuff because John himself was going through and trying to learn and understand about all these different types of tunes. The tune that I played on this album couldn't be more different than the tune that Deanie Richardson played, which couldn't be any more different than the Uncle Earl tunes, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were already gifted with this incredible breadth of genres and types of tunes because John was on this, wild journey with, writing all these different types of tunes from all these different kinds of sources, And so what Sharon was able to do to bring the cohesiveness to it, but yet still at the individuality sing was like that was so impressive to me.
There is a great range of material on the album as the first one. And there's some Celtic Irish flavored things, which I believe Bob Carlin mentioned in his book, Memories of John Hartford. At the end, the Hartford String Band was like approaching this, but never recorded it. And so hearing a couple cuts on Julia Belle, it's like, oh, maybe that was the sort of direction they were headed and didn't get to. So that was a real treat. Could I ask you something else? The first one was almost exclusively fiddle tunes, one vocal number, and of course the funny poem. You sing on this one. There's 5 vocal numbers of Hartford's favorites. What led to that decision instead of just being a fiddle tune album out of the Mammoth collection?
Well, I think
Katie.
well, I think
all roads lead back to Katie.
They do.
It started, interestingly enough, and you guys helped me with the details of this. It started, we were having lunch at Thistle Cafe over west of town and just having a meeting about the album and brainstorming and thinking about what that would look like and people and all of that. And it was like, what do we call it? How do we differentiate it from volume 1? And not just say volume 2, but is there a way to differentiate it? And I think we all just kind of narrowed in pretty much at the same time on the name Julia Belle, because, it's a feminine name, but it's the name of a boat. It's not just, Julia Belle's not a woman. Julia Belle it's the river, it's the embodiment of the river and the steamboats and all of that. And she's kind of like, to me, she's kind of like this mythical feminine thing that and the music and all of that. And as we said, oh yeah, I think that would be good, well, maybe we do the song Julia Belle on the album. And there's our first vocal. And what's crazy is that I had not thought of this until I think we looked it up, just looking up the lyrics, and that 4th verse, the Julia Belle Swain is a women's lib boat. The first I ever knew. Got girls in the pilot house, girls on deck, and a lady in the engine room. And I'm like, it's right there. And it's kind of like, okay, y'all think I'm crazy, but every time we do one of these projects, stuff like that happens. And it's like, okay, Dad, thank you for the direction, because I feel like it's just kind of coming from somewhere. Like that was the right direction to go with it. So that's how that started. So originally there was just going to be one vocal. And then we had a meeting with Allison Brown at IBMA and talking with her, because of course she was on volume 1 and wanted to talk to her about volume 2. And she said, I've had this idea of doing an all-female version of Aeroplane with Kathy Mattea. Do you want to put that on your album? Yeah.
You're going to say no to that?
And then we have a second vocal, and it's like, well, okay, now we have 2 vocals. Now it's going to be weird if we don't do anything else. But what's wild is the stories behind the vocals. Like originally Holly O'Dell was going to do an instrumental, but then she ended up, after recording the instrumental, she said, well, I want to try this other one. And she sends us I'm Still Here, and we are just flattened. That is such a great song. I mean, it is, oh my gosh. And so there's a third one. And then there's, my mom sang No End of Love, which was written for her. And so that was a cool story behind that. My mom's on it. I sing harmony. My daughter's playing guitar. And so there's like a family
3 generation
there. And then Ginger Boatwright singing Learning to Smile all over again. Dad wrote that after a conversation with Ginger after he had been diagnosed with cancer, and she had encouraged him in just that walk through because he was in those initial stages of shock. And she said, here's how this is going to go down. You're going to start feeling guilty for enjoying life because you have cancer. But the thing is, life comes in and you've got to go take it. And he wrote Learning to Smile All Over Again based on that conversation. And Ginger is singing it. And it's just, I love the stories behind the vocals. So it's a little odd to have vocals on an instrumental album, but once again, why not? I mean, we're making up the rules
Yeah.
here.
Who
So
says?
That's right.
where,
You know,
where's the book that says we can't do that?
Right. There's also a tie-in with that particular song, Learning to Smile, all over again. That after the conversation with Ginger, and this is in the book too, that John was motivated to go do some things that he'd always wanted to do but hadn't done yet, and learning to read and write standard music notation was one of them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I feel like that song, kind of gave birth to this project, and it was a perfect song to have on the album. Of course, with Ginger singing it, who is amazing to this day. I got to hear her as a kid. I got to see her perform as a kid, and she's just so great. And Kathy Chiabla is singing harmony on that one, and Katie's mom, Betty,
Betty
sings
Harford Gilbert.
baritone.
well, and you use the phrase giving birth to, and if you go back to No End of Love, now you've got Betty singing that, who gives birth to Katie.
Who gave birth to Natalie?
This whole thing, I mean, I love the vocals on this, as like what you're saying, Sharon, too, about the tie-ins. The vocals, the way they work together with the fiddle tunes in terms of the life story of John Hartford, as well as sort of the musical part of it, means so much because, truth be told, John Hartford writes Gentle on My Mind and several other, very successful songs, just from a commercial standpoint. And a lot of those songs allowed him the freedom to then go traipse all over the country and, stalk fiddle players and learn all of these things. And I just feel like, fiddle tunes are fantastic, but the songs are a part of the journey as well. Without the songs, I don't know that we get a lot of these fiddle tunes. And we also then get to continue to, shine a light on the women in John's life, like Ginger and your mom, Katie, and it all just, it feels cohesive to me at this point. And maybe it's just because I've brainwashed myself into, I'm so proud of, the album and all that. But really, when you start to think about the stories and the history of it, I actually think it does all kind of come together,
I think you're right. We had a couple questions submitted that you're hoping to get answered. The question is, did it turn out the way you planned, or how did it change during the process? That suggests that there was a plan to begin with. So,
I know.
did you sort of freestyle, or did it just evolve naturally, and this is what you ended up with?
I think we started with a germ of an idea. We started with a direction. It's like going on a journey and gathering things along the way, I mean, you can, if you're just straight on, this is where we're going, it has to be like this, no changes, no detours. I mean, you get something and that's fine. And there's no harm in that. But I love the wondering nature of it. I love the discovery of it. I love the surprises that come along the way. I love not knowing. I mean, it's a little nerve-wracking at times, but when you're dealing with this caliber of musician, this caliber of leadership, Sharon, let me just tell you a little bit about Sharon Gilchrist. She's got an ear. She has got an ear. Watching her, she can hear everything. And she hears something and she sculpts sound. I don't know how else to describe it. She sculpts sound. And she knows what it needs, and she knows how this needs to come through, and she knows. And it was just incredible to watch that. And so how can you possibly tamp that down? Why would you?
Yeah.
Because, our hope is that we're going to give people, society, community, good things. And if we're constantly micromanaging those things, they're not as they're not as good and free and wonderful. We want something beautiful. And to get something beautiful, you have to take risks. And so this was about risk. So
And this
I,
the perfect segue is something I want to make sure people know about the record, and about Katie. And this is my favorite thing about this project is Katie's approach to the project. Because first of all, to me, this is like the biggest love letter somebody could give to their parent, is to say, ah, I've got all this music. I want my dad's music to still be alive and breathing and taking new life. And to go to this length to do that, 2 volumes, 17 track, 18, I mean, that's a lot of love.
also
And
insanity. So
yeah.
and it bespeaks again to like Megan said, like Katie's her father's daughter. There's big ideas, very dense. There's a density to any of the ideas, but not only do I love that about the project, Katie's approach to making that happen is, I feel like her father would be so honored, and I just feel like he's tickled pink that she allowed that's what she appreciates, is that creative spark and being able to say, here's 176 tunes, choose something that speaks to you, arrange it. Like, I mean, Katie never once came in and said, I wish they hadn't done that, or no, we really need to do it like this. Never once. And that to me is astonishing. And her trust and faith in each artist, the performance that happened, in myself, our ideas. Megan had a lot of input into who was playing, and was so great that I had Megan's experience musically to bounce ideas off of. But Katie she provided the structure, and it was solid, and she could steer it. It was just, she has that great combination of structure, but totally open to the creativity and letting the magic come in.
Well, she did the same thing when she asked for us to go play the tunes live, and we've all been in situations where we got into something and somebody said, "Oh, just whatever you want to do, it'll be great. No, I trust you." And within about 7 minutes, you realize that that is not at all it, and that they don't trust you, and that they do have a bunch of preconceived notions about what they expect out of you. And it's like, so you go into it and you keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, and another shoe never drops. It just isn't that way. For me, that's a little scary. I'm not that's just not my personality. Have with like a lot of creativity. I'm a little more, I don't know. I can't think of the adjective at the moment, and my thesaurus is not at hand. But I, it's been a great growth experience for me. And going back to that thing about, did it come out as you planned, or did the plan change? I think there definitely was a plan, and I think it actually stuck to plan. But you have to factor in that the plan allowed for a lot of room to move within it, and therefore I think when we got to the end of it, it is what we set out to do. Now, that may have manifested in some slightly different details than, and certainly logistics are, but I would actually say, if you go back to the first meeting that the three of us had at the Thistle Cafe, to the album that we hold in hand now, I think that's the album we set out to make. It's different. I think it's better actually than what we set up, but it is the vision that we all kind of agreed on, which is amazing.
You mentioned getting to play the tunes live, and that reminds me to work in a plug for the Folky Fish Fest, where the
Folky
Hartford
Fish!
String
Folky
Project
Fish.
will be. If folks feel like coming to Missouri
Everybody
in
needs to
May,
go to
I
Folky
believe
Fish.
it's the last
Oh.
weekend in May at the Merrimack Springs Park, St. James, Missouri. Hartford String Project will be there, along with Michael Cleveland, Rob Ikes and Trey Hensley, Wyatt Ellis, and I'm forgetting there's a whole bunch
Daryl
of folks. But the
Scott.
website. Daryl Scott, yes,
I'm
thank you.
so excited. Yeah,
Oh,
so
yes.
you're going to get to see me and Sharon and Rachel Baiman. And
Wonderful.
we will be the trio of that's the other thing, the John Hartford Fiddle Tune Project. If you see that listed anywhere on a festival banner, just go, because it'll be it'll be us, but it might be some other people. That was the other thing Katie said from the very beginning. Like, I just want people to go play the tunes and, and whatever. And so at the moment, me, Sharon, and the great Rachel Baiman, who is all over Volume 2. And so, yeah, Folky Fish, this is the second annual of that festival. And first annual was a blast. We did it last year, and it was, the festival grounds that state park is beautiful. The bands are great. It was so fun. So yeah, come see us there.
Yeah.